Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Thanks for the like as well. You're always the first one in. Let's go, Pablo. Good day, Miles. Mike, good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? How you been, Mike? Good evening, all. JP, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Curtis. Good to see you as well. How you doing? R.I.P. Kirk. Facts. Let's go, Davey. It is a sad day that Charlie has essentially passed away. It seemed like he was going to survive it, according to sources around him. But he didn't pull through, and he did pass away, which is quite sad, actually, because he did a lot of great things. He did help Trump's campaign quite a lot. He, restored some faith back into the United States. And, well, now he's gone. And let's say who's going to take his shoe? Like, fill his place, essentially, to bring the youth still, back into reality. He was the one that got, you could pretty much say, the youth in America to vote for Trump to have this victory. Good evening, Miles of CMF. Manny, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles of CMF. Jason, good to see you as well. How you doing? Artistic, good to see you as well. How you doing? Very sad day, definitely is. It's going to be difficult to find somebody to replace Charlie now, to have the same impact he had on the youth in America to get the votes in, But let's do intro disclaimer of what we're going to talk about on tonight's live. Good evening, Miles. Hope you're well now, mate. I'm doing great. Adi, good to see you. So how you doing? Evening, Miles of CMF. How was your day today? It was interesting day. Good to see you as well, Joe. How was your day? How's things? Welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards for the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations. Pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As in this live as well, which means if you have any questions, put it down in the comment section. More than happy to help you out. And the disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. And also, thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has already liked and retweeted this live so far. On my screen, it says 5 likes and 3 retweets. I guess it's a bit more than that. But for everyone who has liked and retweeted, thank you so much. And if you haven't seen it, members, liked or retweet, please like and retweet this live. And also put a comment outside the live as well. It helps with the algorithm. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for liking the live as well. If you haven't, like the live if you're watching us on YouTube. Now, on tonight's live, we're going to talk about the crypto market space. We're going to talk about essentially the US payrolls that's affecting the market space. We're going to go through some SEC news on tonight's live as well, essentially what's being said by the SEC expanding into the crypto market space. We're going to go through some news regarding crypto regulation, some international news on that sense as well. A few countries are changing their laws and adapting to the cryptocurrency world, which is brilliant to see. We're also going to be talking about tonight's live regarding the matters of more ETF applications essentially happening, and essentially more international news, more prospective news, BlackRock news, and also Ethereum news, and somewhat my own perspective of Ripple news. Now, the first news to cover on tonight's live is regarding the US payroll. But before we go into the US payroll, just once again, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, who was an absolute legend who actually helped the youth in America to have a better understanding about politics. And he helped quite a lot to get essentially Trump to the position he's in with the youth backing him. Second of all, France has even collapsed even further. Europe is on the verge of collapse also. Not just that France has collapsed completely and their infrastructure is coming to a halt. Europe in general is also on the verge of collapse as well. That's going to have effects on the crypto market space, stock market, and so on as well. Now, US payroll. The numbers came out and it affected the stock market and the crypto market space. Ironically, crypto or Bitcoin is supposed to be seen as a safe haven or risk-off asset. Unfortunately, it never reacts like a risk-off asset or a safe haven. So here it is. US payroll revision wipes out $60 billion in crypto market value. According to essentially the Bureau of Labor Statistics announcements, the total non-farm employment was essentially overstated by a latest 911,000 jobs, a 0.6% downward essentially adjustment from March 2024 to March 2025. The reports came out today. The US payroll revision news led to significant drops in value of many leading cryptocurrencies, from Bitcoin to Ethereum, leading essentially this drain. The Bitcoin price had just experienced a surge to above $113,000 and then immediately reacted to a correction to $111,000 during the time of this article. Now, the king of altcoins, essentially Ethereum, lost about 1.6% of its value to trade at $4,777, according to this article, from a high of $4,000, essentially $346.56. Now, however, the other leading essential altcoins bled further and deeper, with essentially Dogecoin and essentially Solana and so on, all losing in value. Now, commenting on the weak US essentially employment data statistics, the Treasury Secretary Scott Benson said the US payroll revision, combined essentially with the previous one, brought the total job over estimations to 1.5 million, which would suggest the economy is weaker essentially than earlier reported. The US payroll revision report shows that the labor markets created fewer jobs for the year ended March 2025. At 911,000 jobs created, the annual revision to non-farm payrolls, the NFP in other words, revealed weak US employment data for the period, with decreasing jobs, and the previous reported essential reading was 598,000, with overall expectations standing at 700,000 decreases. According to CNBC, the weak US employment data marked the most significant revision ever recorded, during essentially dating back to 2002, essentially, and was also 50% higher than the previous year adjustments. The weak US employment data report comes hot on the heels of pressure from the US President Donald Trump's administration on the Federal Reserve's Fed to reduce interest rates. This is an indication that the Fed should be essentially reducing the rates right now. Since the US payroll revision is adjusted using quarterly consensus, the report may signal the fact that the country was grappling with essentially serious weak job market even before Trump essentially ascended to power in January. So they're not blaming this on Trump in any sort of way, because the damage was done beforehand. The weak US employment data report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics portrays a lean job market inside the United States. In other words, the US seems unable to meet the required break-even levels for a steady unemployment rate. For the risk associated like cryptocurrencies, the weak US employment data strengthens the case for the Fed to do rate cuts and increases the likelihood of liquidity injections. Lower rates and dollar weaknesses typically act as a tailwind for crypto markets. So based on these reports, I mean, the Fed should be aiming towards rate cuts now, more than ever. I mean, we have both data reports that came out yesterday and the reports that came out today. Based on both reports, the Fed should be aiming. I mean, Jerome Powell should be doing rate cuts. Trump is, 100% correct. I mean, he did go at Jerome Powell again on Truth Socials, pretty much calling him a moron if he doesn't do any rate cuts, and he's, taking so much time to do rate cuts. The damage is getting bigger and bigger in the US, and it's all Jerome Powell's fault. And I agree, he should be doing rate cuts. It is his job to do rate cuts, I mean, to be fairly honest. So the chances of a rate cut have increased even further. Now, the SEC is what we're going to talk about next. Before we talk about the SEC, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we'll go straight into the next news. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or comments, put it down inside the comment section. I'm more than happy to help you out. Let's see where we were at inside the comment section. We were at here. Hi, Miles T. Good to see you. How you doing? What up, Miles and CMF? Happy hump day. Let's go, Ray. Good to see you. How you doing, brother? Hi, Miles. Paul, good to see you. How are you doing, brother? How are you today, Miles of CMF? Lena, I'm doing great. Good to see you as well. Morning, Miles of CMF. Shelly, good to see you as well. Morning. How you doing, Shelly? Good evening, Professor Miles and the rest of the family. Let's go, funky brother. How you doing? What have I missed, Miles? Not much. We've just started. That was the first piece of news we went through. What's happening with File, Dot, ICP, etc., as it seems they have fallen and never mentioned on here now. Dot, I never mentioned in the first place, to be fairly honest. I mean, sometimes here and there I'll share Dot news. ICP, I'm not a very big fan of. That's why it's never mentioned, and there's not much news around it. File, there's recent news around it. It's expanding essentially into Web3 with some Chinese firm, if I'm not mistaken. Hi, Miles and CMF. George, good to see you as well. How you doing? Hi, Miles and family. Alex, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Now, the SEC, they made some bold statements, essentially, of what's to come next inside the crypto space, which is a massive deal, the SEC saying these things. And this is what they essentially said. The US Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, is taking a bold step towards crypto regulations. During a major address at the OECD roundtable in Paris, essentially, the SEC chairman Paul Atkins announced crypto moment has arrived. Atkins declared crypto's time has come, an indication of change for the US digital asset market and a bullish for the crypto market sense in general. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we must acknowledge the crypto time has come, said SEC chairman Paul Atkins. He explains that for too long, the SEC had used its investigatory powers and enforcement authorities to hold back the crypto industry. That approach was not only ineffective, but also harmful, he stated. According to the Atkins, essentially, this strategy drove jobs, innovation, and capital overseas. Facts. Gary Gensler did a tremendous amount of damage to the US economy in terms of crypto innovation. American entrepreneurs have been forced to spend fortunes on legal defenses instead of building their businesses, he added. Also facts. He stated that the SEC is going to end the reliance on surprise enforcement actions and instead build clear, transparent rules for the crypto trading, lending, and staking, which is exactly what we like to hear. All of this is in order to protect investors, encourage innovation, and make the crypto marketplace more stable and a lot more fair. Under Project Crypto, it looks like most crypto tokens won't be classified as securities. While Atkins didn't specify such as naming tokens one by one, like XRP, ADA, or Solana, his comments seem to offer some relief for many crypto projects that have been under the scrutiny of the microscope. Additionally, this initiative brings forth the idea of crypto super apps. These platforms will enable users to trade, lend, and stake their digital assets all within a single, essentially, regulatory framework. The SEC aims to simplify compliance and create a level playing field for startups to thrive. Atkins also stressed efficiency. Regulators should provide the minimum effect dose of regulation needed to protect investors and no more. Facts. During his speech, he expressed administration for the European Union's essentially MICA framework, highlighting its through-and-through approach to regulating digital assets. The chair highlighted the need for international cooperation to support the global growth of crypto markets. Furthermore, Atkins underlined that clear rules would give innovators the confidence to build within the US rather than move overseas. Project Crypto is a shift for the US crypto regulations. Replacing unpredictable enforcements with structured policies, the SEC aims to create a balanced environment. By doing so, this fosters innovation while protecting investors at the same time. The US Senate Banking Committee has also advanced the nomination of Stephen Mirin to temporarily position on the Fed Reserve's Board of Governors after another member has essentially resigned in August. Today, in a meeting, the Banking Committee voted along party lines 13-11 to advance Mirin's nomination to full Senate for consideration. All Democrats voted against the potential Fed governor, while Republicans in the majority voted in favor. Mirin, whom essentially President Donald Trump picked to chair the Council of Economic Advisors in December, said during a hearing last week that he would not resign from his role, advising the White House if his time at the Fed's governor were extended past January. If confirmed, he would fill a term essentially vacated by Fed member Andrina, ending essentially on January 31st. The potential Fed governor said in December interview that the crypto has a big role potential to play in innovation, but has not made any significant public essentially statements on digital assets or blockchain since joining the Trump administration. At the time of publication, it was unclear when the Senate could vote on his nomination. The advancements of Mirin's nomination comes as Trump's attempts to remove another Fed governor essentially went to court for challenges to supposedly independent government agencies. In a letter, the president demanded Fed Governor Lisa Cook's immediate removal from office, citing mortgage fraud claims. Cook refused to leave her position unchallenged and dismissal in court. In a district of court, essentially Columbia federal judge blocked Trump's order, saying that the president had not identified any reasons to dismiss the Fed governor for cause. The administration filed a notice of appeal on today. So, few things to unpack on all of that. One, the SEC wants to essentially bring back innovation inside the United States, mentioning it one more time live, publicly, to everyone. Great to hear. Two, the SEC saying we're not going to be strict as we were before and randomly sue crypto companies. Three, the majority of the crypto space is not a security, is what the SEC essentially is saying now. 4, they're going to bring regulations, but regulations that bring innovation into the United States. 5, Trump essentially, replacing another Fed member, and the person that's replacing essentially the Fed member is actually pro XRP in a way. And 6, the person that Trump is trying to remove from essentially for a while now, Fed Governor essentially Lisa Cook, who did commit essentially, according to sources, mortgage fraud, the judge dismissed the case and said, no, we don't see anything here. It's odd. If a normal person did commit mortgage fraud, then they'd be penalized with a fine or, depending on how big the fraud is, and a possible prison sentence. But if you're a Fed member, you get a free jail card pass, like it's a Monopoly game. There was always a 2-tier system for politicians and the regular folks. If you're a politician, you can get away with anything you want. And if you're a retail person, you pay, whatever the fine is and whatever the prison sentence is you're going in. There's no workarounds or loopholes for a regular person. But if you're a Fed member, you can commit mortgage fraud and still keep your job like nothing ever happened. It's an interesting world we live in. Because according to judges, that's perfectly fine. But on the positive note, SEC talking about regulations, we love hearing that. The SEC saying no more strict regulations, we love hearing that. And the SEC saying we're not going to randomly sue crypto companies anymore, we love hearing that too. All of those are positives. The other one, what a moronic judge. Now, moving on from that and going a bit international. Before we go towards the international crypto news, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live. As always, if you do have any questions, put it down to the comment section. I'm more than happy to help you out. A lot of things are going on right now on X. X is absolutely, right now blasting off with the whole Charlie Kirk situation. So many hashtags are going. I have X on my screen right now as well, and it's just blowing up. What? Hi, Miles and CMF. George, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles and family. Alex, let's go. Paul says, hi, asked last time, but missed the answer, sorry. If ETFs get approved on 15th, what could we expect on XRP rate, and how long could it be before we see that happen? Let's just presume XRP ETFs essentially passed on the 15th, essentially what price points could we be seeing it? I mean, for this year, 5 to 10 was essentially what they're estimating from 16 research. And they said on the higher end, we could be estimating about $50 to $100 is according to 16 research. Hello, Miles and CMF members. Scott, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Hi, Miles. Michael, good to see you. How you doing? How you today? I'm doing great. How you doing? Any word on XLM today? I'm a little late arriving. Let's go, Scott. And on XLM, not much news on XLM, to be fairly honest. Still a brilliant project. Now, crypto rules. Not only is the USA essentially focused so much on crypto regulations and becoming a crypto hub, as I said on yesterday's live, whatever the US essentially takes, any step forward the US takes towards the crypto space, other countries most likely will follow in suit. Is exactly what we were discussing yesterday. And today, news comes out that India is essentially about to be expanding into the crypto space because they don't want to get left behind because the US is bringing so much innovation. So here is what's essentially come out of India today. Indian regulators are essentially holding back and rolling out essentially full cryptocurrency rules in 2025 because the Reserve Bank of India fears regulations could legitimize the industry. However, according to essentially reports from retainers that cited the official documents, the Reserve Bank of India believes that bringing in regulations will not only give cryptocurrencies legal recognition, but could also cause the sector to become systematic. On the other side of the spectrum is the Indian essential institutions that want the crypto regulations. The Reserve Bank of India wants control, and they can't have that control if the crypto space is completely regulated, because then it'd be seen as some sort of legal tender. On the other side of the spectrum is the institutions in India who want the crypto regulations to come in. So the central bank also explained that even if India were to completely ban cryptocurrencies, it would not solve everything. A ban might stop some speculation and reduce risk for people investing in highly volatile assets, but it would not prevent people from making direct peer-to-peer transfers or trading on decentralized exchanges. So the Reserve Bank of India, essentially even thinking about for a second banning cryptocurrencies, it's never going to work, because people will still have access to cryptocurrencies. These types of exchanges do not rely on banks or central authorities and are much harder to monitor or to shut down. At the moment, India does not have a full law for digital assets. However, the government has already put in place certain measures. There is a 30% tax on profits from essentially crypto trading, which makes speculation more costly. Foreign crypto exchanges are also required to register with Indian regulators before they can operate in the country. India is the second biggest, essentially in terms of population, it's the second biggest in the world. The Financial Intelligence Unit essentially asked internet providers to block access to several well-known global exchanges that had not registered essentially with India back in 2023. These include Binance, KuCoin, Huobi, Kraken, Gate.io, Bitrex, Bitstamp, MXC Global, and Bitfinex. Binance and KuCoin essentially later returned to India's market back in 2024 after registering essentially with the FIU and getting approvals to continue business legally. The FIU also enforces anti-money laundering rules, which also crypto companies serving Indian customers must follow. But even with the strict stance, the country still remains one of the countries that has adopted cryptocurrencies. And according to the 2025 Geographic Essential of Crypto reports by Chain Analysis, India is at the top in essentially adoption metrics across all categories. Even some government officials have also admitted to holding crypto. For instance, Minister essentially Janet reported that their crypto portfolio had grown 19% in value, reaching around $25,500. Still, not everyone believes the numbers essentially tells the full story. And the CEO of crypto platform Velar said the fact that metrics say one thing and reality presents a contrast image, suggesting that India stands essentially in the crossroads, you could pretty much say. So, Indian institutions, Indian retail section wants to be a part of the crypto space. India's centralized bank hates the crypto space because they can't control it. It just shows the level of greed is going on. But I mean, the level of greed in every country, to be fairly honest. And it is the second biggest population on planet Earth. So it is quite a lot of money. According to Chain Analysis, they are ranking, in the top 3, you could pretty much say, in terms of the volume they bring to the crypto space. Now, Belarus, moving on from India. Belarus's president is urging banks to expand in crypto use. So on one side of the spectrum, you have India's centralized bank saying, no, we don't want cryptocurrencies, and the people would want, and the people love cryptocurrencies. On the other side of the spectrum, Belarus's president is telling the central bank, let's move into cryptocurrencies. So Belarusian President, essentially Alexandra, has called on the country's banking sector to widen its adoption of cryptocurrencies as a strict response to tightening Western sanctions that are biting into the national economy. Speaking essentially in a recent meeting with the heads of the national bank and commercial banks, Alexandra emphasized the essentially escalating role of digital assets and facilitating internal payments and bypassing traditional banking constraints hampered by sanctions. According to official data, cryptocurrency transactions related to external payments in Belarus reached $1.7 billion in the first 7 months of 2025. So they're bringing quite a bit of money to the table. Now, Alexandra's forecast that these payments could soar to about $3 billion by the year end, reflecting a growing reliance on cryptocurrencies in international trade and payments, especially essentially as Belarus struggles with shrinking exports under EU and US sanctions linked to its position on the Russia and Ukraine conflict. The president's directive to broaden crypto essentially use coincides with his administration's push for clear and transparent regulations governing the country's cryptocurrency market. In 2024, Belarus enacted legislations restricting individuals from trading crypto outside domestic exchanges to enhance site oversight while promoting regulated digital asset essentially circulations. And Alexandra also advocates leveraging excessive essentially electricity by expanding cryptocurrency mining aimed to diversify their essentially revenue streams for the country. Belarus currently hosts major crypto exchanges such as Binance, OKX Exchange, and KuCoin, all tracking strong growth in external cryptocurrency payments. The nation anticipates crypto users essentially to reach almost 10% of its population by 2026. Indicating that rising acceptance and integration of digital finance solutions in the face of geopolitical pressure. Despite skepticism from some business sectors about crypto's essentially volatility and regulatory gaps, Belarus essentially authorities are advancing pilot projects for crypto payment systems supported by the national bank efforts to balance innovation with financial stability. Now, Alexandra urged swift action from financial institutions to adapt to these unprecedented channels and help the country maintain economic resilience through digital tokens. Meanwhile, El Salvador has also significantly increased its national Bitcoin reserves, acquiring an additional 21 Bitcoins to celebrate their Bitcoin Day that recently passed, marking the 4th anniversary of Bitcoin becoming a legal tender in the nation. So, a few things to unpack on that particular news as well. One, once again, it shows how useless SWIFT is, honestly, that, essentially going around being used as a political tool to sanction countries. Now, Belarus's position is because they don't back essentially Ukraine in this war, so they're sanctioned by the EU and the US for helping out Russia. And in this instance, essentially, SWIFT would have to step in and essentially sanction them from using their payment systems, which is exactly what they did. And essentially, Belarus is halted. The entire country, they don't know how to do payments anymore, which is why they're shifting over to cryptocurrencies. And this is why I say it doesn't matter who SWIFT signs up. It doesn't matter if SWIFT signs up with, Chainlink, if it signs up with Binance, if it signs up with Cardano, Solana, Ethereum, whoever SWIFT wants to partner up with. There's no trust behind SWIFT. No country trusts it that much to be continuing using SWIFT, knowing one day they could be politically stopped from using their payment systems. So, on that note, once again, it shows that SWIFT is pretty damn useless, putting aside the slow and essentially costly effects of SWIFT as well. Even though if they use blockchain, they become fast and cheap, they're still a political tool. On the other note as well, essentially, Alexandra saying that they want to go towards cryptocurrencies even more. Brilliant. Honestly, more countries that are essentially are in Alexandra's situation should be adapting to cryptocurrencies, to be fairly honest, because it brings more liquidity to the table for us, people who do hold cryptocurrencies. Now, we're going to move on from Belarus, which has a very different opinion to India, to Grayscale. Apparently, Grayscale is now just going to be turning anything into an ETF. So they're going to be filing for a Litecoin ETF, Hedera ETF, and Bitcoin Cash ETF. I don't even know anybody that uses Bitcoin Cash, to be fairly honest. It was made as, in my opinion, as a joke towards Bitcoin. And never really, it's adapted too much, to be fairly honest. So Grayscale Investments has filed with the SEC to convert its Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash trusts into ETFs and launch a new Hedera ETF as well, expanding its altcoin offerings into the US. This move is poised to increase institutional interest and market essentially access for Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Hedera, upon regulatory approval, making a essentially potential shift in the US crypto market space. Now, every trust that essentially, Grayscale had is going to be turned into an ETF. I said this a while ago. I said essentially, before Grayscale applies for any ETFs, before they applied even for a Bitcoin ETF or an Ethereum ETF, I said any trust that they have is instantly going to be turned into essentially an ETF. Interesting that they've decided to also go ahead with their Bitcoin Cash ETF as well. But Grayscale Investments has filed registration statements with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to convert its Litecoins, Bitcoin, essentially Cash trust into ETFs with the Hedera. These ETF applications could increase institutional interest with key players such as the Bank of New York, essentially Bank of New York Mellon, and Coinbase. Grayscale seeks to convert substantial assets under management into ETFs pending essentially regulatory approval. This move aligns with Grayscale's strategy to pioneer crypto ETF essentially developments, and this is what Grayscale had to say. We are excited to take this step forward by filing registration statements to convert our Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash trusts into ETFs, enhancing access for investors, said Michael, the CEO of Grayscale Investments, according to Crypto Times. The introduction of these ETFs presents opportunities for enhanced liquidity and reduced essentially spreads in the US cryptocurrency markets. The lack of explicit essential statements from Grayscale's leadership indicates a focus on regulatory outcomes. With the NASDAQ application already filed, approval could further the integration of the altcoins into traditional financial markets. Past ETF approvals have demonstrated the potential for significant institutional engagements. Grayscale's initiative aligns with trends showing increased ETF market activity. If approved, these ETFs could signal broader acceptance of altcoins, setting a precedent for future regulatory applications and market conditions. Now, out of the ETFs they have decided to essentially pass through, which is the Bitcoin Cash, for this one, Bitcoin Cash, Hedera, HBAR essentially ETF, and the Litecoin essentially ETF. Most likely the HBAR ETF is going to get the most amount of volume coming in, and then it'll probably be Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash. I'm not really sure if anybody's going to buy that, to be fairly honest. It's like the Dogecoin ETF. The news got announced. Still, we have to wait till tomorrow, essentially, for it to completely pass through. But there's no excitement behind Dogecoin ETFs whatsoever, by the looks of it. I think it does go back to what Eric and James said. It's the only ETF that's passed through with no utility or purpose. Now, Sub-Saharan Africa. is what we're going to talk about next. Africa is becoming an absolute hotspot right now for blockchain and AI. So much investments are happening over there. In fact, if you are a startup company inside the blockchain space, you're thinking about creating some sort of a startup company, Africa right now is looking for startups to invest into right now. I mean, Microsoft, essentially Meta, there's so many companies that have just went to Africa and invested billions to millions over there right now for AI and blockchain. I mean, we saw Ripple's announcement as well, partnering up with 3 essentially, payment systems in Africa as well. So sub-Saharan essentially Africa is the 3rd essentially fastest growing region for crypto adoptions, according to a new report that just came out from Chainalysis. So the report essentially underscores the region's emphasis on real-world crypto use cases in the face of currency devaluation, and that's why cryptocurrencies have become such a prime, essentially, source of money over there, because of the currency devaluations that's been happening in these African countries, lack of traditional finance rails, and other challenges. According to a report, sub-Saharan Africa received $205 billion in on-chain value between July 2024 and June 2025. This on-chain essentially value received is up to 52% compared to the previous reporting period, and makes the region the 3rd fastest growing for crypto adoption right now, behind Asia Pacific and Latin America. This reporting period, the region saw growth in institutional adoption led by stablecoin flows, which are accounting for the $1 million transactions between Africa and the Middle East and Asia right now. In essentially sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria leads the way for institutional momentum, receiving 92.1 billion essentially dollars right now in value over the last 12 months. Nigeria's scale is tied to not only to its population and tech-savvy youth, but also to the persistent inflation and foreign currency access issues that have made stablecoins an attractive alternative, said Chainalysis. Now, this is Chainalysis' report. Chainalysis does reports on the Asian market space, the Middle Eastern market space, the European market space, the Latin American market space, and this is their essentially, the continent of Africa essentially reports on cryptocurrencies. Chainalysis' report notes that the retail crypto use in South Africa and essentially Sahara has outpaced it in other regions. During the reporting period, over 8% of all crypto transfers were essentially for $10,000 or less, compared to 6% of transfers in the rest of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa, like in many regions full of developing countries, facing challenges that make it well suited for crypto adoption, and essentially unbanked population that doesn't have access to traditional essentially financial services, local fiat currencies that devalue quickly, or persistently high inflation and a shortage of dollars that may make US pegged stablecoins more attractive. This is why Ripple went headfirst and signed up 3 major payment systems in Africa. Referencing its previous reports, essentially covering July 2023 to June 2024, Chainalysis essentially analysts told Cointelegraph that stablecoin adoptions in the region pointed to a direct devaluation of local fiat currencies, finding dollars had become difficult during that period, making stablecoins attractive and contributing to their 43% share of crypto transaction volume. The financial environment in the region may be causing to devalue essentially from other regions, pushing more real-world crypto use cases compared to focus on yield or as an investment essentially instrument. Now, Starkware co-founder and CEO Eli wrote that Africa, with its unique challenges, is key to crypto mass adoption. Blockchain technology is being used in Africa beyond finance. Africa is essentially becoming a hotspot for cryptocurrencies because they didn't have, in most of the regions in Africa, the traditional payment systems set up. And also because the politicians, not just their politicians are corrupt, every politician in the world is corrupt. But because the corruption was quite large, their currencies were very devalued very quickly. So hence why cryptocurrencies is growing massively right now in Africa. And that's why Ripple essentially signed 3 payment essentially systems in Africa straight away. The more essentially people from the continent of Africa essentially join the crypto space, the more amount of liquidity that's going to be entering towards the market space. And, Ripple is a part of the 3 biggest payment systems. So that's a lot of liquidity towards the right project. Now, and that's according to Chainalysis, which Ripple, according to Ripple themselves, they trust a lot. And they have partnered with them as well. Now, BlackRock is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about BlackRock, let's go to the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we go straight into BlackRock news. So let's see where we were at inside the comment section. We were at here. Good evening, Miles and CMF. Free Bever. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Paul. Will it be easy to borrow against our XRP? What LTV can we expect, and what sort of interest rate on the loan? Also, what interest rates could we expect to gain from the banks from our loans sitting with them? Well, it depends at that particular moment in time what the bank is going to be offering. Some banks might offer you a standard rate right off the bat to any customer that walks in. So HSBC, for example, is offering some sort of essentially service where you can, keep your cryptocurrencies with them in Hong Kong, and they'll give you a certain amount, you can borrow against your crypto assets. Now, I'm pretty sure they don't accept any cryptocurrency out of the door, but they do accept certain crypto projects that you can borrow against. Now, the rate would depend on that moment in time. They could put a standard rate so they could get people coming in through the door, or they could put individual rates based on your own circumstances or based on how much you want to borrow. Now, there are risks to borrowing against your cryptocurrency as well, which you should be very well essentially aware of. So, for example, if you borrow, let's say if you have a certain amount of XRP in this essentially equation, because your question is with on XRP. So let's say you have a certain amount of XRP and you want to put it with essentially HSBC Bank to borrow against it, somewhere down the line. And let's say essentially the price of your asset goes below what essentially you borrowed, then you would have to add more money on top to keep your collateral essentially. Because the money that they essentially, if I put down, for example, 100,000, let's say in this instance, I put down, I want to borrow $100,000, let's say, and I have 200,000 XRP. Essentially, I have $200,000 worth of XRP. I put it with HSBC Bank, and they gave me $100,000 just for reinsurance purposes, because that leaves me room. The more you borrow, the higher you are at risk, if the bank even accepts you borrowing a lot more. But the more you borrow, essentially, the higher the risk of you losing your collateral. The less you borrow, the easier it is to pay back, and you won't lose your collateral. So if I have $200,000 worth of XRP, for example, and I go to the bank and I want to haggle them in some sort of a way to borrow at least $160,000, and I have $200,000 of XRP, and I want to borrow $160,000, they might most likely reject me. But if they don't reject me, that leaves me not much for room of error. So if essentially XRP gets devalued somewhere down the line because of major geopolitical situations around the world and the value comes down, then I would have to put more on top of my collateral to save my own ass. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my XRP originally I put down and also essentially owe the bank money. So there are risks to borrowing against your crypto assets that you should be very well off. Now, the positive side of essentially borrowing against the bank is obviously no tax. If you borrow against your cryptocurrencies, you can use your assets as collateral and you don't get taxed on debt. The other positive is, for example, let's say the price of XRP is sitting somewhere here. Let's just say this is like $5, for example, and the price of XRP goes to $10, but you borrowed that $5 and now spent the $10, then obviously your XRP is valued a lot more. You could go back to the bank, borrow again, pay off the original loan, and then essentially continue on the new one. It goes up again, you borrow again, pay off the previous one, continue the new one. It goes up again, you borrow against essentially the new one, pay off the previous one, continue the new one. So there are methods to it. There are positives and negatives borrowing against your crypto assets that you should be very, very well essentially aware of. None of this is financial advice in any sort of way, but it's just things that you should consider essentially. Borrowing too much against your assets could end very bad in case the price essentially becomes volatile and essentially it goes below what you borrowed, so your collateral you'd have to add more on top. Borrowing less, you'll be on the safer side because essentially, even if the price of XRP goes down, you're still in the safe zone because you put down so much collateral, for example. So it just depends on how you look at it. And again, if the price of the asset goes up, like if XRP goes higher, then you borrow again from the bank and pay off the original one and then just continue on the new one. Then it goes higher again, you borrow again, pay off the old one, continue on the new one. And during all this time, you're pretty much tax-free because you can't get taxed on debt. It's the bank's money, not yours. Again, these are all things that you must know regarding borrowing against your own assets. Good evening, Miles. How are you doing, brother? I'm doing great, Cali. Good to see you. How you doing? Good evening, everyone. Denise, good to see you. How you doing? But great question, Paul, because a lot of people might want to know about that. Now, BlackRock is what we're going to talk about next. But when the time comes, I will be there to help everybody out inside the CMF if they need some sort of a help on that sense. Now, BlackRock. BlackRock CIO calls for immediate Fed rate cuts. So BlackRock also wants a rate cut. It's not Trump that wants a rate cut now. It's BlackRock also that wants an immediate rate cut to be happening, according to two reports that came out, one today, one yesterday. BlackRock CIO, essentially Rick, urges an immediate 50 basis point rate cut by the Federal Reserve. If we get a 50 basis point international rate cut by the Federal Reserve, it's going to be a very good day for cryptocurrencies. Contrasting CEO Larry Fink's cautious stance, primarily reflecting debate on how to mitigate economic stress. The debate essentially highlights differing strategies aimed at US economic challenges with potential impacts, essentially on economic challenges with potential impacts on financial markets, especially cryptocurrencies. BlackRock faces internal disagreement over US Federal Reserve policies. CIO Rick Ryder has urged the Fed to implement a significant rate cut, contrasting essentially CEO Larry Fink's call for cautious due to inflation concerns. Larry Fink suggests only 25 basis points cut for 2024, essentially for 2025. Well, there's essentially Rick Ryder believes an immediate 50 basis point cuts should be seen very soon. So who essentially saw this coming? Pretty much no one. That essentially BlackRock is on two sides of the spectrum. The CIO of BlackRock wants 50 basis points. The CEO of BlackRock wants 25 basis points rate cut. The good thing is they both want rate cuts. BlackRock's strict focus essentially on Ethereum could benefit its aggressive cuts proceeds essentially, particularly through its build fund. This reflects essentially anticipation of increased risk asset activity with lowered rates. Inflationary pressures guide cautious CEOs on the Wall Street who prefer limited rate cuts to maintain economic stability and ensure controlled inflation. This aligns with essentially Fink's view over Ryder's aggressive stance. Historically, sizable Fed rate cuts boost BTC and ETH as investors seek higher returns, while lower rates might trigger relays. Essentially, inflationary concerns remain significant, stressing the importance of essentially balanced fiscal strategies. And the disagreement within BlackRock's essentially highlights broader market uncertainties, underscoring essentially the importance of Fed policies on financial markets and rate decisions are poised to influence institutional investments and crypto market trends, particularly for blockchain platforms like Ethereum. So BlackRock suggesting we should get rate cuts faster. The CIO of BlackRock is suggesting we should get rate cuts pretty much now, and it should be 50 basis points. CEO of BlackRock's previous statements were move cautionally and maybe a 25 basis points essentially, not maybe a 25 basis rate cut. Both of them want rate cuts. One wants a much more heftier rate cut than the other. Either way, it's going to benefit essentially BlackRock quite a lot getting a rate cut because the amount of cryptocurrencies they hold, not themselves, their client base, but also in general for us inside the crypto space. Now, moving on from BlackRock's perspective on the market space to US Credit Union. The US Credit Union is about to be launching a CLDUSD stablecoin in Q4 of 2025. The Saint Cloud Financial Credit Union, a Minnesota-based institution with over $400 million in assets, has announced plans to launch essentially a treasury stablecoin, marking a claim first for US credit card unions. The digital currency named Cloud Dollar, CLUSD, is scheduled for release in the fourth quarter of 2025. These SCF, essentially CU, the blockchain company Mitigus, and the financial technology company Daland, essentially CUSO, are working together on the project. The statement says that the essentially CLDUSD stablecoin will be created by Metal Blockchain and will be linked to credit unions' main banking system with Daland essentially. This comes after the Genius Act was recently passed, which made it easier to understand how stablecoins are regulated inside the United States. Officials from the credit union stated the project aims to leverage blockchain technology to enhance transaction efficiency and compete with modern fintech companies. With Cloud Dollar, we're essentially readying our shop for on-chain money movements, merchant payouts, member-to-member, institutions to institutions, at a fraction of a card framework of a card network fees with full transparency, said Chase Larson, the EV essentially PCLO for SCFCU. The project puts a traditional bank and a $270 billion stablecoin project market, which is essentially rising very quickly right now. Jeff, the CEO of Dolland, essentially stressed how important it was essentially for the known organization to handle digital assets safely for their members. Credit unions can't afford to watch digital assets evolve without them, adding that members need to trust the essential institutions to navigate this space safely. The launch of stablecoins by essentially the SCFCU is a big step forward, connecting traditional banks with digital asset systems. It could help other smaller regulated banks learn how to use blockchain-based solutions for payments and transfers, since essentially it was the first credit union to release its own stablecoin. This move adds stablecoin issued by the bank that is regulated on the essentially ecosystem. It also shows that the blockchain technology is becoming more accepted and used in mainstream US financial industries. Few things to unpack on that one as well. One, this is the world's, or essentially the United States' first US, credit union to be launching a stablecoin, which is pretty damn impressive for the first ever credit union to be launching a stablecoin. It adds credibility towards digital payments. That era of crypto is a Ponzi scheme, there's nothing behind it, to now essentially the credibility is being added through institutions, banks, governments. And in this instance, also essentially pension funds as well. In this instance, credit unions, the first one to launch it. Is it a brilliant idea for every institution, every bank around the world, essentially every credit union, pension fund, company, small, big, or large, to create their own stable coins and publish it into the market space? No, because honestly, it will just become novelty items. As I've said previously, Hong Kong put it best. We only need 2 to 3 stable coins for US dollars, 2 to 3 stable coins for euros, 2 to 3 stable coins for pounds, and so on. We don't need 25 different versions of the US dollars or essentially 25 different versions of the euros, because it's just confusing for everybody. And also we have to, essentially make sure there's enough liquidity for transfers to be happening. It's just stupid to begin with. So 2 to 3 stable coins perfectly fine is what I would have to say. But nevertheless, great to see essentially more companies, banks, institutions, in this instance, credit unions coming forward and showing the credibility needed for the crypto space. Now, US largest banking regulator, essentially agency, makes a bullish statement on cryptocurrencies, is what we're going to talk about next. Before we talk about that, let's go start the comment section first. Let's see what's happening then, and go straight into the next news. Share the live. Let's go Scott. Let's go Ray. Let's go Denise. Thanks for the clarity. So how can paying, say, 5% PA be cheaper than just paying the tax on the sale? Well, the tax, depending on your own jurisdictions, can be 10%, 20%, 30%, or 40%, depending on where you're living. And, in the UK, there's somewhere around 20% right now. It's not established. We don't have rules in the UK so far, so it could be higher, it could be lower as we progress through. The issue isn't essentially, that. The issue is, if you are somebody that's holding cryptocurrencies and you haven't declared it for such a long time, then that's when the issue starts to rise. And you'll be looking at a very, very hefty fine first before paying any sort of crypto taxes. So, and there are other methods, which is essentially borrowing against your crypto assets. None of this is financial advice whatsoever. It's just information for everybody to know about. Now, I'm not recommending either method. US largest banking regulatory essentially agency makes a bullish statement on cryptocurrencies. Jonathan, the chairman of the US office of essentially OCC, said that banks must end discrimination in their participation in legally essentially permissionless activities related to cryptocurrency sectors. Speaking essentially at an event in Washington today, John argued that he sees cryptocurrencies as a natural extension of financial intermediary services. This is brilliant to hear from somebody like John, because the OCC is the one that's going to be giving Ripple the green light. They're also the ones that's going to be giving the green light to Circle and so on. And if the OCC is coming out making these essentially, assessments or announcements, you could say, essentially regarding the crypto space and saying, well, the crypto space is something natural that needs to exist and so on, it shows that the banking associations previously that sent letters, well, the 42 banks that sent letters through the banking associations to the OCC, It seems like the OCC couldn't care less about them, because the OCC, with the statements they're making today, are actually very pro-crypto. I consider many crypto-related activities among the legally permitted transactions that banks want to participate in, said John, adding that the institution will work more closely with banks in this area and draw a roadmap, essentially, that will ensure the safe conduct of activities. John's comments essentially come after President Donald Trump's pledge to make the US the new crypto capital of the planet, and signed new legislation including stablecoin regulations. The Trump administration has recently taken steps to support digital assets, while the OCC has also moved to eliminate the practice of excluding certain individuals and companies from banking services, known as debanking. John acknowledged that crypto technologies may pose some risk, stating that banks should have the necessary infrastructure in place before undertaking new activities. However, he added, "I don't see innovation as a contradictory essentially to security and robustness," adding that the regulatory approach would not have closed to innovation. So far, honestly, the OCC is showing that they're extremely positive towards cryptocurrencies on the legal sense. They're not negative towards cryptocurrencies. They're making statements that banks are actually in favor of cryptocurrencies, even though certain banks, 42 banks, according to familiar sources, sent letters through the banking associations to the OCC to give companies like Ripple a hard time on getting a license. But according to the OCC, they are pro-crypto, and that banks are also pro-crypto as well, and that they're all in favor of legal crypto essential innovation, which is incredible to, honestly amazing to hear that the OCC is making these statements. Finally, they spoke about something. Now, moving off that to Hashdex. Hashdex essentially expands US sales team, appointing industry specialists. This is going to add liquidity towards the market space, to be fairly honest. Hashdex, a global crypto asset manager, announced the appointment of 4 new business development specialists in the US to expand its presence and sales efforts on essentially September 10th, 2025, which is today. Each of the new appointees will oversee a specific region in the US. They will be responsible for providing investment guidance, market insights, and portfolio construction, consulting to financial advisors and institutions. The new hires include Justin Taylor, Northeastern essentially US, Jaron Carter, Southeastern essentially in US, Chris, Midwest US, Tommy, Southwest essentially US. The new hires will report to Mick, the Hashdex Global Head of Distributions, who will cover the Western region. This is what the statement that was made from this massive, essentially global, what you could say in a sense, global crypto investment company. US investors are increasingly exploring ways to incorporate digital assets through familiar regulated vehicles, said essentially Marcelo, the co-founder and CEO of Hashdex. By expanding our distribution team with proven professionals across key regions, we are reinforcing our commitment to helping advisors navigate this essentially evolving asset class through the index-based strategies such as Nasdaq Crypto Index. Justin has essentially over 30 years of experience in capital markets and wealth management. His background includes senior business development roles at advisor credit exchanges and UBS. So these are some pretty heavy hitters that's going to be expanding into the crypto market space in the US and bringing all that liquidity to the table, as well as the executive director position in sales and trading at Citigroup and essentially Gianni Montori. Jaron was the previously vice president and market leader at BlackRock. Just think about that one. This man was essentially previously a vice president and market leader at BlackRock, now working for a crypto company expanding in the US, where he worked with advisors on investment strategies and portfolio optimization. He's certified by Digital Asset Council of Financial Professionals. Chris has over 7 years of experience in asset management, banking, and financial advising. Before joining Hashdex, he was a regional associate at William Blair Investment Management and a private, essentially, client banker at JP Morgan Chase. Tommy previously worked as a essentially performance analyst at an institutional investment consulting firm and began his career at Charles Schwab's in a client advisory role. His experience includes guiding investment decisions for healthcare systems and insurance companies. Each of these professionals bring deep expertise and strong relationships in their respective markets, said Mick, the global head of distribution at Hashdex. Their essentially regional focus will enable us to better serve essential advisors, respond quickly to client needs, and ensure our products are accessible to investors across the country. As we expand our tech, these roles will be critical to delivering the exceptional services and education as essentially Hashdex is known for globally in that sense. And to drive the mainstream adoption of crypto, Hashtag is expanding its focus of traditional finance. The company is leveraging its established foundation of index-based products and a new team of experienced professionals to engage directly with the US financial advisors and institutions. And this strategy is designed to educate these professionals and positions them to facilitate the new phase of crypto growth. Few things to unpack. One, that is an impressive team of people to be expanding into the US with. BlackRock, JP Morgan, Charles Schwab's members to be expanding into the US with. Two, they're going to bring quite a bit of liquidity, not overnight, but over time to the US market space and towards the crypto market space, to be fairly honest. Three, Hashdex is very big in Hong Kong, which means essentially they're going to be bringing in quite a lot of Chinese investors also towards the market space as well. And four, we know for a fact that there are a lot of Chinese banks and essentially Chinese institutions that are bringing in investments through Hong Kong, testing the waters of the crypto market space. And there are in fact Chinese banks and Chinese institutional CEOs pushing the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, essentially to go towards cryptocurrencies. This could be the first steps of essentially a company like this with financing from China expanding into the US inside the crypto market space. Odd, how they're not doing it first in their own countries, but they're doing it in the US. Either way, liquidity is liquidity, to be fairly honest. Now, the next news on tonight's live is regarding Ethereum. Before we talk about Ethereum news, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or statements, put that inside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's see what's happening inside the comment section first. Thanks for the clarity. So, okay, now I read that one already. Can you please explain how a house will be tokenized and purchased? When a house essentially is tokenized, depending on which blockchain it goes to, preferably XRP Ledger would be better, to be fairly honest. You can even use EVM if you want to be on Ethereum. But it's easier, essentially, globally, that house will be sold easier. It's transparent, it's faster on the sale. And in general, it's just moving away from traditional sense. Also, tokenizing a property, you could sell it to multiple people. You don't need to sell it to one person only. So beforehand, it had to be somebody that can afford to buy the house. For example, let's say there's a house up for sale for $500,000. Some people, or a lot of people, might not have $500,000 to their name to buy a property. But with tokenization, you could buy a fraction of that property through tokenization and earn essentially a yield on that, essentially like rent money, for example. If that house goes up for rent, for example, you earn a certain amount of it, somebody else earns a certain amount of it, and so on and so on and so on. Everybody can earn a little bit of a wages from that property. So where there was a time period where you had to have the money to be able to afford the entire house, now you can buy a fraction of the house through tokenization. The other benefits of tokenization also is essentially it's more transparent and essentially much more globally accessible. So you don't have to be essentially there at that moment. And also there's other factors of being able to borrow against your assets at a much more faster rate. In a traditional sense, you would have to get your accounting, your lawyers involved, and a banker involved to essentially show that you have collateral to borrow against certain assets. In a tokenized world, they can just essentially search the blockchain, essentially with your wallet addresses, and instantly see what properties you own in tokenization, essentially how much you have in cryptocurrencies, and so on, which makes it much more easier for you to be able to borrow against your assets at any given time, 24/7 around the world. So there are many, essentially positives towards crypto, essentially towards tokenization of an asset like that, like a house, for example. Now, Ethereum. Ethereum network fee surge and scalability solutions. Once again, Ethereum is in, under fire, basically. Because even though Ethereum has somehow fixed their essentially fee situation for a while now, it's went back to normally what it was. So this is what's happening. So Ethereum network actively surged with $1.4 million in fees generated just within 24 hours, placing it at the forefront of blockchain transactions globally. The spike underscores heightened Ethereum demand, impacting essentially transaction costs and highlighting scalability challenges amidst the recent essentially upgrade that's going on. So, as I said previously, the crypto space is pretty, even essentially in the words of BlackRock themselves, with the statements the SEC made today, that the crypto world is going to bring so much innovation to the US, and we're going to make the rules a bit more loose so everybody can do whatever they want, pretty much. BlackRock came out with a statement of we're still at the early phases of crypto, which is great. The why I'm mentioning BlackRock right now is because that sentence that BlackRock said was still at the early phases of crypto, which we kind of are, to be fairly honest. Which means the crypto market space is this big, and there are certain crypto projects struggling to survive when the market is this big. Imagine if the market goes from this to this, how much struggle is going to be essentially on the emphasis on this. I mean, Ethereum skyrocketing once again on fees, just because the amount of essentially people using a network at the same time, pretty much the simplest way to put it. Ethereum's network activity has recently surged, with the network fees hitting $1.4 million in a 24-hour period, making it top performer on the chain revenues. This increase actively highlights growing demand and associated costs with Ethereum ecosystem, which is great. A lot of people might want to use Ethereum. The bad side about that is the fees are ridiculously high now again. Ted Pillows, essentially analyst, renowned for his insights, stated Ethereum generated $1.4 million in network fees yesterday, the highest among all blockchains. Key figures like essentially Vitalik Buterin have focused on reducing transaction costs through upgrades. Although there is no direct commentary from Buterin himself on this massive fee spike right now, the essentially Pentra upgrade represents ongoing efforts to address the scalability challenges of Ethereum. The immediate effects of surging fees impact both users and developers, causing increased transaction costs. This fee spike essentially could influence market behaviors and decisions among stakeholders, reinforcing necessities of scalable solutions within the blockchain community. Financial implications include essentially growing institutional interest due to elevated fee revenue. However, no significant changes in institutional asset flows have been reported. The observed increase in fees indicates persistent challenges in network capabilities, scalabilities, and transaction processing. Ethereum continues to leverage multiple technical upgrades to manage network congestion efficiently. Despite rising essentially fees, the community remains optimistic about the long-term solutions through essentially continued innovation and streak essentially upgrades. Historical trends suggest similar fee surges occurred during speculative booms. The implementation of a more cost-effective solution could potentially stabilize long-term network viability, addressing both users' demands and scalability issues, as noted by Amio, a member essentially of the Ethereum community. The Ethereum Petra upgrade will supposedly make life easier for network users. It is now introducing a smarter wallet to eliminate the need for transaction approvals, cheaper transactions, stronger security, and much more. Great that Ethereum for the 11th time is trying to fix their network fees, because sometimes Ethereum could be very cheap on network fees, and then when a network is congested again, it gets very expensive, and that's just moronic, to be fairly honest. Again, we are in a crypto space, in essentially market space that is this big. If the crypto market space goes global, in a sense, projects like Ethereum can't handle it, because not that they can't handle it, it's just that the fees will be so high. And in this instance, when they're mentioning it, that developers or people that are trying to use the network for transactions are paying too much in fees, which makes it stupid. It's like if Swift went global. Imagine essentially if Swift went global, it's in the same sense as Ethereum going global, and you're paying these ridiculous fees to make a simple transaction. And that's why other chains, preferably XRP Ledger, is 10 times better for financial essentially projects. And all good things must come to an end. And on that note, we actually have come to the endings of tonight's live, to be fairly honest. The majority of the news today was towards essentially Charlie Kirk essentially passing away, to be fairly honest. And again, once again, in a rest in peace on Charlie Kirk's essentially, no one saw that coming in any sort of a way, and I hope his family's doing all right. And he did a lot of work to bring the youth to vote for Donald Trump, and we have to give him a lot for that, honestly, because he was the man that made the youth in America vote for Donald Trump. And now that he's gone, there's nobody to fill his shoes to bring the same perspective and mindset that he had. But yeah, on that note, we have reached the endings of tonight's live, and this was episode 370 of the CMF Live. And on tonight's live, we talked about essentially Ethereum fee surges once again. We also talked about essentially on tonight's live regarding the matters of Hashdex increasing its expansion inside the US market space, with essentially the Chinese financing coming through to the US towards the crypto market space. We talked about the OCC actually saying positive things about the crypto space and saying that they want to work with the crypto space, which is great because Ripple applied for a license for the OCC. We also talked about tonight's live regarding the first ever US credit union to launch their own dollar. We also talked about tonight's live regarding BlackRock's CIO saying 50 basis point rate cut should be happening now from BlackRock's CIO. We went through news regarding on tonight's live regarding the African market space from a chain analysis report, which has essentially came out on the side of Africa is expanding quite rapidly towards cryptocurrencies, and a lot of liquidity is being added towards the table. We're talking billions of hundreds of billions of dollars added towards the liquidity. We also talked about Grayscale on tonight's live launching a Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash ETF as well alongside their HBOR ETF. We talked about Belarus's president telling their centralized bank they to bring some crypto regulations in, and that Belarus wants to bring crypto innovation towards their country. We talked about essentially on tonight's live regarding India's essentially Reserve Bank not being so keen on cryptocurrencies, but the institutions, the retail, are very keen on cryptocurrencies. We also went through news on tonight's live regarding the matters of the SEC declaring a lot of things that were extremely positive for the crypto space in terms of regulations and innovation, and the US essentially payroll data reports as well. So those were all the things we discussed on tonight's live. And I just want to say one more thing. Two things are ironic. One of them is very coincidental. We are coming up to the midterms in the US, in terms of voting, where we are essentially coming up to the midterms in the US. And Charlie Kirk had, a grip on the youth in America in terms of voting. And somebody paid off, in my perspective, that old man that took out Charlie Kirk. Because of the grip he had on the youth and the midterm votings that are coming up in the US. So in my point of view, it almost seems like this was a political takeout, because we're coming up to the midterms in the US. The Democrats are horrendously losing badly, and Charlie Kirk was the man that had the grip on the youth. I mean, he was going around essentially around the country, talking to the youth of America because they are the next generation of voters, and he had a grip on that. And the youth were listening to Charlie Kirk. They were voting in favor of Donald Trump. And as we're coming up to the midterms, suddenly they take out Charlie Kirk. So my point of view, that was definitely a political, essentially, motivation to take him out. Very timely political, essentially, takeout as well. So honestly, all wishing well to Charlie's family. I hope they're doing okay, to be fairly honest. But yeah, that man did do a lot of positive things for us, and the timing is very coincidental, in my opinion. And also, it masks the other news that was going around recently as well about the girl on the bus as well. R.I.P. Charlie Kirk. Good night, Miles. And CMF, Mike, see you tomorrow, but at the same time as usual. Good night, Miles. Funky brother, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. R.I.P. Charlie Kirk, the hate is very real out here. Brainwashing is a hell of a drug. Facts. Let's go, Ray. See you tomorrow, but at the same time as usual. Take care, Miles and CMF. Stay safe, stay alert, stay alive. Let's go, Ray. See you tomorrow, same time as usual, brother. Good night, Miles, and thank you for great live and news, JP. Let's go. See you tomorrow, but at the same time as usual. Great show tonight, Miles and CMF. Thank you very much, and have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow. Carlos, see you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. Night Miles and CMF. Pablo, see you tomorrow, sometimes as usual as well. RIP Charlie Kirk. Terrible day for the world. Thinking of everyone close to him, especially his family. Should not be happening. All this violence. Thanks, Miles. Night and day all. Let's go, Shelly. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual as well. Good night, Miles and CMF. Thanks for great news. See you tomorrow. Let's go, praying forever. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. That's it was not that man that did it. Yeah, I agree. Similar to what's happening in Germany, facts. In Germany also, a lot of people might not know this. In Germany, they've taken out 11, or so, if I'm not mistaken, essentially right-wing politicians. Just suddenly all had strokes and heart attacks. There's something happening in the world of politics where it's getting too violent. In the world of politics, where politicians are feeling threatened by their essential opponents, and they're taking them out, which is very wrong to be doing so. But yeah, roughly about 11 essentially German right-wing politicians just essentially got taken out by strokes and heart attacks all of a sudden as they're coming up to voting season in Germany. A lot of violent things are happening in politics right now. Are you suggesting that Democrats had something to do with this? Not with this? Wow. I'm not suggesting anything, Scott. I'm just telling you what the timeline is. Good night, Miles, and God bless Cali. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Great job tonight, Miles. Let's go, Scott. Thanks, Miles, for another great evening, mate. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Let's go, Addy. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. I'll see everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you're around the world. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Love you all. Like, comment, follow, retweet if you already have. And if you have, thank you so much. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual for episode 371 of the CMF Live. The disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes only. Most politicians are sitting in the office and threatening citizens. I agree, 100%. See you tomorrow, same time as usual.